Welcome back to the Local Experience. My name is Kevin Weir with Action Coach Business Coaching, and today's guest is Rob Rowley. Rob Rowley is what we call a death and dirt attorney here in Spokane. Welcome to the Local Experience, Rob.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin, and good to be with you and your listeners.
Thank you. So obviously, I'll let the audience know you and I have known each other many, many years, all the way back to 1987, I believe.
Yeah, we know where a lot of the bodies are buried. Too.
Yeah, and so do you. You were that, I remember we were both stationed together in the Army, and I still remember the first time you showed up at the Officers Club, and I was one of those lieutenants who was sizing up that young lieutenant from Nebraska. I'm going, I wonder who he is. You probably don't remember that much of me, but I sure remembered you.
Yeah, nope, I don't remember you. You married guys you hung around with.
Yeah.
You didn't hang around with the single guys.
And it's really funny because I wasn't married. I would bring my girlfriend Renata at the time, so everybody thought I was married. And of course, she didn't speak a lick of English, but she liked, being around the facilities. So isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So tell me, you're a death and dirt attorney. Kind of explain what you mean by that.
That's kind of a shorthand we lawyers use. If you are a death attorney, then you're typically doing estate planning, probate. That's where the death comes from, and dirt refers to all things real estate. So, transactional wise, you will typically focus on one or both, but a lot of overlap because if you do estate, you do estate planning because you have real estate, and then when mom or dad dies or you're passed, then you got to probate it. So it's kind of the virtuous circle, as we call it.
There you go. So so you get out of the Army, you go to law school. What made you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, I had no intentions of staying in Spokane. Actually, I was after the end of the first Gulf War, I was switching from blowing things up to JAG Corps. So it was a change in things I was going to do. So I was planning on being a JAG officer, but I was here went to Gonzaga, and the good Lord gave me a change of mission. So I ended up resigning my commission and stayed in Spokane. And so I moved to Spokane in 91. And so this would have been about 94.
Yeah, interesting.
And so I've been here in Spokane ever since.
Okay. And then what made you decide to specialize in probate and real estate?
Well, I started out like most employees or lawyers. I worked for a couple different firms. I did everything from big to little. And so I've been in a small 3-man firm and then a large 12-man, which is large for Spokane. And so we did everything under the sun. So I've litigated everything from the state Supreme Court all the way down to small claims, federal court, federal bankruptcy court, federal court of claims. So I did all that, and then I also did a lot of transactional work, so death dirt. And I decided that I preferred doing more on the death dirt side than the litigation.
Yeah,
there's not much. There's an old saying, there aren't many old litigators. It's very hard on your heart and your mind and space. So.
Yeah, I could imagine that takes a toll out of you. Yeah, it's very stressful. So what made you decide to go on your own rather than staying in a firm?
Well, it's the classic for any business. You think you can do it better than the old man. And so about that time, my wife and I were also getting pretty heavy into being our own investors, owning real estate. So it's hard to serve two masters. So we ended up going out on our own, and that was a great decision. I have nothing but the best. I still get along great with all the other lawyers I've worked with in the past, always Prince of folks. So that was in 2004 that I've been on my own, and haven't looked back since.
Oh, that's great. So what I want to talk a little bit about today, and I think our audience is going to be very interested in this topic, is we've got the vaccine coming out. We're going to start seeing over the next several months, us moving from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. One of the things that's going to come from that, currently right now, we are on an eviction moratorium, correct?
Right. So coming up on 1 year, actually, it was February 29th of last year is when the first moratorium was in place.
Yeah. So now what's going to obviously happen here in the next several months is they're going to start lifting these eviction moratoriums. Now, as we lift these moratoriums, what do you see happening out there? What are some of the cause effects things that you believe, or from your point, you see might be happening?
Well, there's three different sovereigns out there that we're actually dealing with. The first one is the governor, and his moratorium is in effect till March 31st of this year. The second one is actually the federal government under the federal CDC eviction moratorium, which was extended out to the end of January of this year. And then the third one is actually the state legislature, Washington State. They are actually meeting next week on the 11th. They will take up. They are already looking at a very interesting bill, as we would say, a very, very, very tenant-friendly bill. So the governor's moratorium says until March 31st or until changed by the legislature. So I expect a very, let's put it this way, there are three different sovereigns, and to know what's going to happen, who knows?
Okay, so this tenant-friendly bill, do you believe it's going to pass, and B, if it does pass, what do you see as the main provisions in that bill?
Yeah, well, there's an old saying that there's two things you never want to see made: sausage and law. So
Yeah.
you don't know. So there's going to be a lot of horse trading out there. What was proposed by the tenant advocates over on the west side, and it's their Christmas list. And so I would hope that there would be a fair number of legislatures would take some pity on some of the landlords. Who knows? But I do think that what you'll effectively see is it'll be very difficult, if not impossible, at least for the next 12 to 18 months, to evict tenants in Washington State.
Okay, so
And
how?
then on top of that,
yeah.
also, then you got the federal CDC and then some other ones on top of that too.
So, what have been the effects that landlords have had to go through with this moratorium? What's been going on out there in the landlord community?
At least in the Spokane area, and I'm fairly well read, and I do keep up on what's going on statewide. There's essentially an email group of real estate attorneys statewide. We communicate pretty regularly, and I've actually been part of a couple of Zoom meetings with the state Supreme Court and state legislators, where they're gathering information for to basically enact some laws. But what I'm seeing is that it depends on who you are. I mean, a lot of your small mom and pops are not had issues. I think that there's just a small percentage of tenants that have had issues and are taking advantage. And then you have some other tenants that are just have lost financially and have no way of ever catching up on that. If you are a larger landlord, for example, and you have a number of properties, you can tend to spread the losses over the other property, kind of like a mutual fund. You can, if you have a dog, you can cut your loss on that one. The other ones do better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if you are a small mom and pop and you have the one property, it's brutal. I have both on both ends. So a lot of the corporate ones, the larger ones, are also they're hurting, but they're not bleeding like a lot of those.
Okay. So what if you are a small mom and pop landlord right now, and you've basically had this forbearance going on? They're not getting rental income. They're falling behind. What are some options for them?
Well, they got a couple of different options right now. There has been some money that has flowed through the federal CARES Act in March of last year for to help reimburse or that tenants can apply for to catch up on rent. That was administered locally by SNAP and Catholic Charities. The other one was so that's money. There's also some new money in the newest bill also for that. There's another 120 million of funds that come from the state of Washington that also help. So that's one way. A lot of times, if you are behind on your bank loans, which most of do, a lot of times you would go to your lender and say, "Hey, look, this is what's going on." I have not met a banker yet that would say, "Yep, we're gonna foreclose on you." They realize what's going on. So a lot of times they'll add that you could talk to them about maybe re-amortizing the loan, maybe adding the missed payments on the back end of the loan.
Okay.
Um, there's not, other than that, there's not a whole lot of other things you can do is I've been seeing a fair number of small ones selling too.
Yeah.
So that's where there are three different exemptions to the governor's moratorium. The first one, if the owner is going to sell. The second one is that if the owner is going to occupy as primary residence. And the third one is what we call bad boy evictions. Is so if that tenant is engaging in extensive criminal history, there's a process for terminating that. It's a very technical process. There are a lot of forms that all the T's and I's have to be dotted perfectly.
Yeah.
Because the Attorney General is actively enforcing those type of things. And so the moment a tenant gets one of these, they'll get a complaint filed with them, and they'll almost instantaneous in contacting the landlord or the property manager or the attorney.
Okay. So going forward, taking a look at, let's say these moratoriums, it sounds to me a lot of these moratoriums might be extended out due to state legislature or the governor could. What effect is that going to have on the real estate market? Do you envision a lot of properties going to go out for sale? Are we going to have a lot of construction on multifamily units come to a halt, or what do you envision?
This is an interesting recession. I was talking to a banker I know here locally about this very scenario because I asked her, and a very well-known banker at local, and she said that not a lot of her landlords are behind on their rent. I mean, they actually have been keeping up on their mortgage payments. So we're not seeing like we did back in 2007, 2008. All right. So what we're seeing is it's kind of a weird dynamic where in 2007, 2008, we had a crash. So tenants weren't paying and the banks were getting paid. So we had a real rash of foreclosures, a significant decline in house prices. Both locally and nationwide, there's a real shortage of properties. What you see is the corollary where you have increase in prices. Housing prices locally have gone through the roof. So there's equity in these properties, and so they're selling instead of being foreclosed. I just don't see, and I also work for a number of banks as local counsel on the foreclosures, and so at least talking to my counterparts at some of the big banks, they don't really have anything for that's going to sale. There have been also a couple different foreclosure moratoriums by the federal government for government insured loans, and those also have been kicked back. And so I think really this year is not much is going to be happening too much. I think really over the next 2 to 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see a lot of more damage in the future.
So what kind of damage do you envision? I mean, if you could look into your crystal ball 2, 3, 5 years out, what does that damage look like to you?
Well, if I knew that question, then I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would be investing in different things. So the older I get, the more I realize, and for hubris, that I have no idea what the future is going to bring. I thought that we would be I didn't think we would be here where we're at right now. To say what the future is going to say, I don't know. I'm an optimist. I like to think that these things will work through. I think that the federal government is another variable that we don't know what that's going to look like. I think they'll probably also push back a nationwide CDC eviction moratorium because everything I've talked about is Washington State. It didn't apply to Idaho or anywhere else. So that federal moratorium would then be a nationwide.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting because then obviously do you envision that we are still going to have proactive multifamily unit housing builds? Because right now, obviously, we're sitting here in 2021. We're seeing prices skyrocket. We're seeing our vacancies, I'm assuming they're still pretty low, correct?
Correct.
And so with the moratoriums maybe extending out further, you don't think that the commercial multifamily builder market has been spooked at all? Are they going to go forward aggressively? What do you think?
It depends. I mean, if you looked over at Seattle right now, the rents have actually dropped fairly substantial, almost 20% since the beginning of the year. And that's because all of those people are now working from home, or they're moving out of the area. So there's been a real softness, and that's in the Seattle area. So
Yeah.
Spokane always has a tendency to follow Seattle. So I think we'll see that flow through eventually.
Oh,
And so if that goes down, then that the bankers who are planning to underwrite loans, they're looking locally, regionally, and nationwide. And if they see that, they're going to also cut back on credit themselves.
or do you think it might be just the opposite, that Seattle is, with its economic feasibility and stability under question, do you think that a lot of those people are leaving Seattle for places like Spokane that are still in aggressive growth mode and have a lot more societal and economic stability?
People are definitely moving to Spokane and Idaho, northern Idaho in particular. Idaho was the fastest growing real estate nationwide last year. So a lot of people moving into that North Idaho, or just anywhere in the state, actually. Yeah. Eastern Washington is the same way. I mean, the market is hot. It's kind of stalled a little bit, and it's a function of lack of inventory, to the truth, on single family. So.
Yeah, because a lot of, for example, we had just had a neighbor 3 doors down from me just bought a house. They moved over they were actually in North Seattle, and they just told me point blank, they didn't want to be in Seattle anymore. And with the ability to work from home and do work remotely, they just found Spokane very attractive. And to me, I guess what I am seeing is that as we have gone through this pandemic, this whole ability to work from home has accelerated. It was already on an upward path, but the whole pandemic just rocketed this out like nobody's business. And therefore, we're starting to see people who have the ability to migrate, and they don't have to be locked into going to downtown Seattle to be in an office. I mean, what do you think? Are we going to see that continue?
I think you're going to see a huge market contraction on the commercial office space in particular, like the space that we're sitting in right now.
Exactly.
Just because people can work from home. I was listening to, I'm a big reader of the Wall Street Journal forever, and then a number of NPR economics podcasts that I like, and they had the same discussion, is that that's a nationwide thing. It's people need all this extra space.
Yeah.
And so, and then if you look at all of your strip malls and retail, so again, it's the Amazon effect. You can buy it online versus going to some strip mall over on East Sprague or North Division.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm looking. I would be honest with you, Rob. I would not want to be a commercial property owner in today's environment, and I see that happening also. And I'm assuming you probably are that this is going to continue to contract as society changes the way it works and lives.
Absolutely. I'll give you, for example, back in April of this, the largest, I'm not going to say the name, but the largest coffee company in the world went to all of and they haven't hurt financially. They're publicly traded. And they went to all their landlords and said, we're not going to pay the rent that we agreed to. We're going to reduce it, and we're that company, and come sue us if you don't like it. And that happened to a lot of different landlords. So you could either have a very viable tenant, and the tenant's going to say, no, I'm not going to pay that.
Yeah, because I've got one of my clients now that actually has operations in both of the large malls here in Spokane, and she just told me point blank that they are not going to extend their lease because of all of the challenges that are going on in the malls with the lack of foot traffic and everything. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's something that I think, if I am looking at in my crystal ball and I am basically owning commercial property, business, the people who own commercial property have to figure out a way to pivot. I'm going to give you a good example of pivoting. I got a really good friend of mine who is now open. He's over in Puyallup. He's actually opening up this center where people can come and do like VR reality, mini bowling malls. And so one of the things we might want to look at is, hey, I've got this retail space. What am I going to do? What's the trend that might look like over the next 5, 6, 7 years where people will still need physical space, but it's not going to necessarily be traditional retail. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there in that respect if you're willing to reconfigure and find and attract those kind of businesses like virtual reality or gaming places or anything that's going to cater to homebound people who do need to get out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But end of the day, people still have a place to live.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing is, that's getting back to your psychology 101, part of your Maslow hierarchy.
Yeah.
You always got to protect home and hearth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No question about that. So one of the things that I know that you do is you work with a lot of business owners on different, agreements or things of that nature. What is the biggest mistake that you see a business owner making when they are executing any legal agreements in their business?
A lot of times is they just they've worked with these people before, and they just they trust them a little too much, and they haven't done any real due diligence on them. They'll try to go into a partnership, and they literally know nothing about this individual and what's their past history, because a contract is just only as good as the person behind it. I have business owners that I've done business with people for 30 years and on a handshake. And that works, especially like in construction realms and things like that. But you got to do your due diligence on people.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're doing the due diligence, let's say, because one of the things that I'm a firm believer is I would avoid partnerships unless the partnership then is a no-brainer to create synergy and expand the business faster than possible. I'm actually working with a client right now. He's coming together in a partnership with another individual, and we've done a lot of work at examining that. And actually go through a very defined process to get there. But I can tell you right now is that I would say probably about 80% of partnerships out there are inadequately documented or vetted. Would you say that's probably potentially accurate?
Absolutely, especially with partnerships. I'm not a big fan of partnerships. I guess you'd call me the divorce attorney for partnerships. Is that I always see what can go wrong with them.
Yep.
I always tell people I have one partner in life and I married her. All right. So in that one you can't get out of.
Exactly.
Till death do you part on that one.
I'm the same way as you.
But people do that, and I'm not saying that you can. But if you are going to do them, you definitely want to get it documented on the front end.
Yeah.
Especially even if it's family members, sometimes you probably want to document it more, especially if we have different generations.
Exactly.
Or different power structures between the two, where one has the money and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'll give you a quick story. I had a partnership a number of years ago that I started coaching them, and senior partner comes in my office without his junior partner, and I knew something was wrong. And the famous words came out of his mouth: "Kevin, we need to talk." And when the coach hears that from one partner, who's by himself, trouble's coming.
Right. Yeah.
Fortunately, I was able to get them back on track. We had to kind of backtrack all the way to the beginning, going, how did this take place? What roles and responsibilities? Who does what by when? What are expectations? He basically asked me, so how much will it cost for me to buy him out? And I did a back of the envelope calculation of the value of his business. He says, well, I can't do that. And I said, well, you better figure it out. And that's where I think a lot of business owners who are in partnerships, they get in, they grow the business, but then they realize they don't want to work with the other person anymore. And then they find out that the buyout is far worse than anything else. And then I feel like they're stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lawyers do the same thing. There's a real famous case of the most aggressive lawyer in Spokane. Very well, if I mentioned the name, everybody would know him. He and his partners did not have any type of partnership agreement, and lawyers. And
wow.
And they're all a bunch of meat eaters, as we say. And so they ended up when the sheets did split eventually, they ended up litigating that thing, went up to the Court of Appeals. They gave it the Supreme Court back. But again, it's like the old thing about the cobbler. Even the cobbler's kids don't have shoes, so
Yeah.
lawyers don't always document things.
Yeah, that's too bad. Staying on the kind of the same vein then with business owners, what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of baby boomers coming up on getting ready to sell their business. What, from a legal aspect, what do you think that a business owner who is needing or looking to sell their business, what do they need to do from a legal aspect to prepare for this?
Well, they should start early. If they're 65 and they're just starting to think about it, this might be a little bit too late for them. So you need to be proactive on that. I mean, probably anywhere at least 3 to 5 years minimum to start looking around to see what's out there. I mean, a lot of the small ones are usually some it might be a family member, it could be a dedicated manager where you'll sell it to them, or sometimes you'll use business brokers. But a lot of times, if you use a business broker, it might be a year, 2, 3 years sometime.
Yeah,
depending on the type of business. So starting now, getting all your paperwork straight, getting your corporate book straight, all the things that would be required, especially if you do any type of sale where you do SBA financing.
Yep.
They'll always require that all the paperwork, the documents that these owners don't do, get done. Better off to do it then than now.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that from the business coach side of things, I always ask a business owner is like, okay, how much do you need to sell the business for in order to achieve your financial requirements for retirement? I would say 9 times out of 10, I get the blank stare going, or they go to, I don't know. So I always said, well, the first thing you need to do is sit down with your financial advisor who's helping you with any kind of retirement funding. Once you know you have that idea, then the next step is, okay, what's the current valuation of your business? Where is our starting point? And then once they get a current valuation, we can say, okay, we take a look at the gap. This is where you need to be. This is where you're at right now. What do you need to do to get the value from point A to point B? And see, this is where somebody like I come in, because I don't deal with the legal stuff, the accounting stuff, the insurance stuff. But what I'm really focused in on is, hey, we've got to close this gap over the next 5, 6, 7 years to get it to here. How are we going to do that? What's the step-by-step process in order to grow and create increased value in the business in order to achieve that? And I think we're going to see, I would say over the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to see an absolute flood of these business owners wanting to sell in the market. And unfortunately, a lot of their businesses are not in sellable shape at this point.
Yep, absolutely. You got to be proactive on the stuff.
Yeah. And I guess that's one thing. If somebody is listening to this, I'm going to implore them to say, hey, if you're within 5, 6, 7, even 10 years of wanting to sell your business, I think the time to start right now is now. You need to take a look at where your business is, what needs to happen to get it prepared for sale. And I think obviously one of the things I'm always advocate of is you need to sit down with a lawyer and figure out what are all the legal things that you need to do that will help prepare for an eventual sale.
Well, it's also a team. So lawyers, and also bringing in your CPA.
Yep.
Because there's, if you could structure it from a tax viewpoint, that's saving money. So every dollar you save in taxes is net to you. Bringing in your business coach, bringing in your insurance broker, depending on the type of business.
Absolutely.
Bringing it together as a team to figure out how do we get you from point A to point B.
Yeah. And this is something that I'm a firm believer in, is that any sort of sale of a business is a team approach. You need the business coach, the CPA, the lawyer, the insurance broker. If you're going to use a business broker to sell it, great. One of the things that I think we're going to see over the next several years is a lot of ESOPs, selling to employees. Obviously, the transition from one generation to the next, depending upon the willingness of the younger generation. So I guess to me, from 2021 to 2030, we are going to see just a huge market of all of these businesses being sold.
I agree. Now the problem is that as you are well aware of, is trying to get bank financing.
Yeah.
For a new business is going to be very, very difficult to get there.
Exactly.
Most banks typically want to see at least 3 years of a healthy, profitable financials and tax return.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Before you can do any type of financing on that. So typically you'd be looking at seller financing.
I was going to say vendor seller financing is probably going to really come into vogue here over the next several years.
Right. And the way you would do that then is you just got to make sure that it's well structured.
Yep.
And then once you have that, then it's a lot easier to do an SBA refinance, takeout financing on that thing.
Yeah, and I can see that's going to be a great strategy. I think we're going to see a large desire or a large need for different SBA fundings for this business. And I would hope the SBA probably realizes that, and I would hope they are prepared for this wave coming through over the next 10 years. But it is the federal government, and you never know how ready the federal government is.
Yep. Again, it's also, remember, SBA is the banks actually write the check, and then it's insured by the SBA.
Exactly.
So that's also the other thing you have to look at is the current condition, economic climate, because it might be willing to sell, but if it's in a poor business cycle or in a recession, it's a little bit harder to do seller financing on something like that.
Oh, I get that. And I think that's why we really need to have the ability to at least attempt to put on our crystal balls and our little funky hats and look into the future and said, okay, what are we going to look like in 2025, 2028? And I know that's a long ways downrange, and heck, who could have predicted the current COVID-19 panic and pandemic that we're in now? However, if you don't attempt to look downrange and at least think about it, then we're stuck in current set mind thinking, and then we don't do anything.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So, Rob, let me ask you this. How can somebody get a hold of you if they need to discuss death and dirt, attorney, or legal issues as a business owner?
I'm very active on social media, so you can just plug my name in. You also go to my website, which is rowleylegal.com. So that's ROWLEY legal.com. All my contact information is on my website.
And how many Google reviews do you have?
I had somebody much smarter than me beat me up a few years ago about social media. So I have 126 reviews on Google, 4.6 average.
Wow. Now I've got, I think we're up to 18, but I've got a 5.0. So I got you beat on that, but I don't quite have you beat on the number of reviews.
Well, I'm going to go online right now and I'm going to make you a 4.9 then.
Oh, Rob. You wouldn't do that to me, would you?
Never.
Well, thank you, Rob, so much for coming in. And thank you for watching today. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Ring the bell, and we will see you next time on The Local Experience.